Hey, it's time for 5 favorites. It's been a little while since we did one of these, but we got my friend Gama Martinez to come do a 5 favorites with us. Gama, tell us a little bit about yourself. In here, hold up your books.
So I'm a writer, obviously, a runner, somewhat of an adventurer. God of Neverland came out last year. Queens of Wonderland comes out this week.
Yeah, this week. It should be out right now when this is live.
Okay.
So, and I have read God of Neverland. I haven't read the second one yet, but I read God of Neverland, and I thought it was fantastic. It was one of my favorite reads of the year. You gave it to me the year before it came out, and it was one of my favorite reads.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Gama and I met at, was it Superstars writing conventions?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Kevin J. Anderson's thing.
Yeah,
I think we met like 15 years
something
ago.
like that,
yeah. And he spent a long time writing middle grade stories and then got this book deal at Harper for a fantastic novel.
Yeah,
so,
thank you.
do you want to give us any of your background? Like, where'd you grow up and anything like that?
I grew up in Houston, went to college in Dallas, moved to Utah about 7 years ago. Basically, I was like, you know what? There's nothing holding me down, and there's a really strong writing community there, and that's what I want. So I picked up and
good bookstores in Houston, though.
Yeah,
I really like the bookstores in Houston.
Yeah.
We're glad you moved out here. It's been good to see more of you.
Yeah.
At the writing conventions and things like that. And we wanted to have you on, and we let you pick the topic. Our 5 favorites are our 5 favorite classics. Which is really relevant because give us a pitch for God of Neverland.
So God of Neverland, Michael Darling, who was the baby in the Peter Pan movie, is now all grown up, and he has to go back to Neverland when he discovers that Peter Pan is missing. Because what people don't realize is that Peter was essentially the guardian of the hopes and dreams of children all over the world.
Right.
So
based off of Celtic mythology.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Like that was my favorite idea from the whole thing, was this idea that Peter Pan was actually a Celtic god. And the Peter Pan in Neverland is just kind of the modern incarnation of him.
Yeah, exactly.
He found a playground and he went there, sort of thing. And that really worked for me. I like how you worked in kind of real historical, sort of historical novel things with the fantastical, with real world mythology. It was really, and it's a thriller. It's written really fast paced and fun. So
yeah, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
So we're going to talk about, you defined classic as public domain, which is a great way to say, to divide what it's going to be, because you've written a book using the public domain.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm a big fan of the public domain. I'm glad that we're going to start expanding it here very soon. We're gonna have Mickey Mouse and Batman and Superman entering in the next decade or so.
Yeah.
So
Winnie the Pooh was this year. So.
Yeah, Winnie the Pooh was this year. So we finally are getting some new things to play with. And we're gonna start. Why don't you tell us what? Let's see. We'll start with my 5, because then we get to end with your 1.
Okay.
So my number 5 is Dracula.
Oh, I love that one.
You've read Dracula then?
Yeah.
Man, I read Dracula when I was in college, and I'm like, it can't be that good, right?
Yeah.
And then it just was. It was really good. It's one of those books that I read on my own rather than for a class. And I was shocked. It's basically the first found footage horror movie, except as a book, because it's all people's journals and letters. It's what we call epistolary, and it's like found footage. It's basically the Blair Witch Project, before the Blair Witch. Do you read? Have you read a lot of classics not for school and things, or?
Actually, that's how I got started. I was just going through. I was like, I should read some of these. So I read some of, Alexander Dumas' Count of Monte Cristo.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yep. It actually, it didn't make my list. That's honorable mention for me. Count of Monte Cristo's.
I really enjoyed The Jungle Book.
Yeah.
So
I've never actually read The Jungle Book.
Yeah. So just a lot of fun, just going back and, discovering a lot of these for the first time. So.
Did you ever read Graveyard Book?
No, I didn't.
That's Neil Gaiman's kind of take on The Jungle Book, except it's a kid raised by ghosts in a graveyard instead of,
Nice.
All right, what's your number 5?
My number 5 is Gulliver's Travels.
Gulliver's Travels. It didn't make my list. I have read it. I'm going to tell you, Gulliver's Travels felt like it was over my head.
Uh-huh.
So Swift was a political commentator, and there's like, do you remember like there's this thing where they dance on strings?
Yes.
Or things like that. And I'm like, I'm sure this references the political parties of the day. I am completely lost.
See, the way I interpret it is, you know what? I have no idea how some of the government works. And, you know, it kind of fits there. I was like, okay, so you see whoever can jump highest and they get a position in the kingdom.
Right.
And but I just love the whole sort of almost the whimsical nature. It was like, yeah, you know, I got shipwrecked. Oh, and suddenly there are all these little people, or suddenly there's these giant people, or there's these talking horses. And, you know, it's not like he's like, oh, you know, what's going on with these guys? It was like, no, he just accepts it, you know.
Yeah.
It's the whole idea during like the whole age of exploration. We don't know what's out there. So, you know, why not little people or giant people or talking horses?
Yeah. My number 4 is I just cheated and put the collective works of Sherlock Holmes. It's not so much a cheat, though, because I read most Sherlock Holmes in a single volume that I bought when I was young. That it was just the collected works. It had all 4, I think, I want to say, novels and all of the short stories. And I just kind of read through it as if it were one book. So, have you read Sherlock Holmes?
I read the first one.
Okay.
Yeah. Where like, I just remember the scene where Watson saying, oh, no one can do what this article describes. And he was like, actually, that's me.
His first one, Study in Scarlet? I think it might be. Study in Scarlet might be the first because there are a number of novels, and then there's several novellas. I think Hound of the Baskervilles is actually a novella, not a novel. But yeah. It was one of those really fun experiences kind of working through these. I know that Sherlock Holmes is also a cheat because only half of it's in the public domain. Do you know this story?
No, I don't.
So Sherlock Holmes, half of Sherlock Holmes entered the public domain, and then they enacted public domain laws, or maybe it was just some quirk let the first half, but the second half didn't. And so famously, the estate has been suing people for their Sherlock Holmes adaptations, saying Sherlock Holmes in the books didn't become nice to people until the second half. He was always mean in the ones that are public domain. So if you have Sherlock Holmes be nice, you are infringing upon our which I always thought was just hilarious. Yeah.
So my number 4 is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Yeah, which, I mean, I just love that book. Just the whole character of both Captain Nemo and, suddenly I'm blanking on...
The hero.
Yes.
Yes, the protagonist guy.
Yeah.
Who wore striped outfits in the movie, I believe. Yeah. You know, I like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Have you read a lot of other Verne?
I've read some. I read The Mysterious Island because for a while I was coming up with a story about Captain Nemo, so I was trying to figure out where all he was. And
I read Journey to the Center of the Earth, and I was expecting to be a little more fast-paced, like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Journey to the Center of the Earth, the book, is not quite as fast-paced. Some of this early science fiction was a lot more about this sort of, hey, there's something weird over there in the distance. We better not go over there because it might be dangerous. And I felt like Journey to the Center of had a lot of, we saw something in the distance that was really scary, but we didn't go that way because it'd be dangerous, you know? So.
Yeah.
We can't bring up 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea without referencing the infamous Saturday Night Live skit. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Man. Anytime I cannot hear the name 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea anymore without hearing it be read by whatever the actor was, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Yeah. And was it Kelsey Grammer? It was Kelsey Grammer playing Captain Nemo. Is like, look, they're like, if you haven't seen, you should go watch it. But the whole joke is, they think it's down 20,000 leagues down, which I thought when I first, saw the cover. So it's a very natural thing. It's actually 20,000 leagues distance-wise because you can't go 20,000 leagues down. And Kelsey Grammer just gets really annoyed at them for getting it wrong. So my third one might also be a bit of a cheat because everything else on here is novels, and I picked a play. I picked my favorite Shakespeare, which is Much Ado About Nothing. I'm one of those who like really actively like enjoys all the wordplay and things in Shakespeare. And I know it's like hot take, Shakespeare is great. But anytime I say I like Shakespeare, all the non-English nerds I know cock an eyebrow and say, "Oh, you don't really like Shakespeare. You just pretend to like Shakespeare because Shakespeare is, the greatest writer in the English language." No, he's really funny. Like every line is funny. And I think part of the problem is to get the jokes, you have to do a little study of Shakespeare. But I go to like Shakespeare plays and I'm sitting there chuckling, and then I look around, I'm like, I guess I'm not supposed to like. It's hard to get all the jokes, and I get like a third of them. But I really legitimately love Much Ado About Nothing. Do you have a favorite Shakespeare play?
I am a fan of wow, I'm blanking. Macbeth.
Macbeth?
Yeah.
Oh. Which we can say the name of here because it's not a playhouse.
Yeah.
Do you know that story?
No, I don't.
You're never supposed to say the name Macbeth in a playhouse, in a theater, because there is a story that came up that when a theater was going out of business and having trouble, they would always do Macbeth last as a last-ditch effort to get people to come because it's so famous. And so that became the sign that a playhouse was about to go under when they did Macbeth. And
had
so
no idea.
It became a meme before there were memes. You don't call it Macbeth, you call it the Scottish play, because it's bad luck to call it Macbeth because that's reference, then your playhouse will close.
All right, I will keep that in mind if I ever have a playhouse.
If you ever have a playhouse, call it the Scottish play.
Okay. So my next one is also a bit of a cheat because I said the Oz books.
Yes, you picked the whole oeuvre as well, yes.
Which there are so many of them, and so the ones by L. Frank Baum are in public domain, but the ones that followed are not. So
oh, interesting, yeah.
It's just a matter of timing there, but yeah, there are so many, and
so I've only read 2 Oz books. I've read the first 2. I've never read any of the, I mean, he wrote, what, 9 or 10?
Yeah, he wrote something like that, and at the end, he was styling himself as the royal historian of Oz.
Right.
And, just dealt, and it's such a just magical place. It's like, and...
Pun intended, yes.
And just, they have basically everything there, There was a civilization that talked too much, and they were the rigmarole. And, you had the teapot people, which came, not the teapot, the China people, which which you saw in the movies in The Great and Powerful Oz.
Right.
Yeah, and, there's just so many things there, and I really want to play in that universe. So yeah.
So someday, you're kind of tacitly promising us.
Yeah.
Have you read any of the ones not by Baum?
No, I haven't. I whenever I'm getting something to work on, I avoid the non-public domain ones to not accidentally bring something in.
Really smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't be accused of copying it if you haven't read it.
Yeah.
Well, my number two is Pride and Prejudice. I have trouble picking between Pride and Prejudice and Emma. I like them both quite a bit. At the end of the day, I picked Pride and Prejudice because my wife and I went on our second date to the Pride and Prejudice, the Keira Knightley one, back when it was brand new in theaters, and back when you couldn't reserve seats at theaters. So we just got our tickets. We showed up late because we'd gone to dinner. It was our second date, like I said, and we ended up on row number 1, front and center. So I joked that we spent my entire second date looking up Mr. Darcy's nose. Yeah.
So my number 2 is Alice in Wonderland. That's where this one comes from.
Yeah.
It's just a whole quirky, whimsical thing, and it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I was impressed by how weird it was when I read it. Like, the movie adaptation, the Disney one, is weird. The book is weirder. Yeah. A lot weirder. And, it's just like you want weird, fantastical bizarreness. I can totally believe that this is a story that you just kind of, I believe, like he made up and was telling to his niece or something like that. Just like, I can believe this is a story that you just used to entertain a young child because it's like, they're losing interest. Weird thing. Now there's a cat who vanishes except his smile. Yeah.
Yeah. So just the whole dynamic with the queen and everybody else, and then, I mean, I'm also gonna lump in Through the Looking Glass because same.
Yeah.
And just how everything is. They say everything's reversed, and if you don't look too closely, you don't realize that's based on a chess game.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll go to the number ones, all right? We'll do mine first.
Okay.
So imagine your drum roll here. Anyone who knows me when I've talked about something going to know what my first one is, and it's Les Miserables. So Les Miserables is special to me for a lot of reasons. Number one, I didn't read it till after I'd seen the play. And the play was one of those great moments when I was a teenager. The traveling troupe came through Lincoln, Nebraska, and we got students. They took students, so I got to sit like on the third or fourth row. It was only students, and I was blown away by this play. Like the emotion and the characterization and the innate goodness, but traversed with adversity and things like this just blew me away. I went home and I'd known it was my mom's favorite book, which is another reason that I love it. And so I got the book and I read the unabridged version, Waterloo scenes included, because it was my mom's favorite book and I just love this play. And then I fell in love with the book adaptation. I think it is a beautiful novel. And so it's kind of one of these things that's always been in the back of my mind. Can I write characters as powerful and interesting as the ones in Les Mis? Have you ever read it?
No, I haven't.
The abridged version. I've only read the unabridged once. Every other time I go ahead and read the abridged version. Victor Hugo, great writer. Had a lot of things to say, like about the Battle of Waterloo, and there's quite a bit of time spent maybe in the sewers at a certain point, and there's just certain chapters where it's like I empathize, being a person who writes giant books, that maybe sometimes you enjoy a certain scene a little more than it deserves to be enjoyed.
I mean, that's kind of a product of its time. I mean, you have Moby Dick with chapters and chapters of processing whale oil. So.
Yes, and I actually love Moby Dick too. It'd be a honorable mention for me would be Moby Dick. So it feels like if the closest thing that I can get to a fantasy novel that isn't fantasy is to read something like Les Mis or Moby Dick that takes you to a different world. And my favorite story about Les Mis, I've told this before, I believe, on my live streams, is that famously, Victor Hugo and his editor have the shortest communication on record between an author and their editor. He was living outside, I want to say the country, at least outside Paris, when the book came out, because the book was politically divisive, right?
Okay.
He was advocating for the common people in a way that the current political establishment did not appreciate, and they considered him a rabble-rouser. So I believe he was living outside the country. And he sent a message, I believe through Telegram, to his editor, but maybe it was just a letter. I can't remember, if they even had, but I want to say it was a telegram that he sent to him, and he just sent, when the book came out, ? And the editor sent back the reply, ! Because it became a massive bestseller immediately. So your number one, going to be a big surprise, I'm sure.
I'm sure. My number one is Peter Pan. My first book in this series, God of Neverland, was based on Peter Pan, and where Peter is actually the Celtic personification of youth, which I thought fit really well.
It really does. It's great.
And I just love the whole idea about Neverland. It's not so much evident in any of the movies, but in the book, it's really evident that Neverland is based on the imagination of the people that go there.
Right.
And so I had a lot of fun just playing with that. And at one point, they're talking to Wendy's daughter, who went to Neverland's underworld because she thinks every place has to have an underworld. So now there's an underworld, and they talk about the dark swamp being called the dark swamp because children think there's supposed to be such a place as a dark swamp. So
it actually gets really dangerous. Yeah. The idea that the imaginations of children can, Yeah,
so I love that book. I've read through it so many times, and I just felt there was more of a story there to tell. So,
So here we go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having
me. The second book's out now, the first book that people can find in good bookstores everywhere. It has a nice cover quote from me on the front because I got to read it early and I really enjoyed it. Gama, thank you so much for coming on and hanging out with us.
Yeah, thank you.